This initiative actually started from Anna, Dr. Abram, and myself when started to talk about, we have the common interest of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. And we found it is so important to have an international exposure, both from, of course, Hong Kong and UK, of course, and also international. So this, I will explain what is Yuan Dao Study Society, but this initiative is a collaboration to widen the international exposure through ideas, experience, and common concerns, whether in Hong Kong, China, as well as the UK or internationally, and enrich the reality. What do we mean by intercultural, interreligious dialogue? So through the wisdom and experience sharing of scholar and practitioner, we would like to nurture the mutual growth through study, workshop, conference, and summer program. And it's the great teamwork, obviously. And thank you, Dominic, to be the representative of Margaret Beaufort. And of course, Anna is behind all that. And then very supportive of Sue, Ferdia, Louise. And Father Peter Choi, he couldn't join today, is the president of Yuan Dao Society. And I will explain what is Yuan Dao Society. And Professor Edmund Kwok, he's a professor, historian, taught comparative history for 30 years, published 29 books, and he was the vice president and deans to 3 universities in Hong Kong and China, and also advisor of Yuan Dao. And myself, of course, a different role of research associate, Margaret Beaufort, as well as the vice president of Yuan Dao. And I'd like to share a little bit about our collaboration effort so far. Thanks for Professor Michael Barnes and Dr. Peter Coughlin. We kicked off our first international webinar in July on Vatican II, Pope Francis and beyond. And there are 20 physical face-to-face participants because of COVID, but also around 15 Zoom participants. And last month, in October 27th, we started a series of 2020 and 2021 seminar. And the focus is reliving the traditions in contemporary world. And the first seminar was on Pope Francis' Fratelli Tutti and the implications to Hong Kong and its diocese. There were 56 Zoom participants, and also we extend 1 more hour for discussion. And later, Professor Kwok will share and a little bit taste of the conference, what it is all about, especially interesting perspective to Hong Kong. So our effort, we use this theme, we're living the traditions in contemporary world, also interreligious, intercultural dialogue, to have a series of webinar. So we already did the Pope Francis Fratelli Tutti webinar. Dominic will be talking to us on dialogue in music, November 20th. And then Father Yan will be talking about Matuichian Chinese music. Other speaker, Professor Simon Guan from Chinese U Divinity School, will talk about interreligiosity of pastoral care. And of course, we have other interesting topics like new evangelization, Confucianism and Christianity, and aging, etc. So these Pope Francis Fratelli Tutti has been receiving very well. We have 3 speakers from different background, philosopher, historian, and focusing and also focusing trainer and also psychologists. And this seminar, besides this, and then coming, Dominic will talk about the law of music towards an intercultural dialogue on music from perspective of early Christian cosmology. We just put this poster and will be coming out soon. And Father Yan will be the respondent, and it will be very interesting, talk about dialogue on music. And I will leave Dominic to share it a little bit later. So need to explain a little bit of what is Yuan Dao. Yuan Dao actually is an association of priests and laity accredited to the Catholic Diocese of Hong Kong, nonprofit organization. It includes communication, reception of both domestic and overseas academics, promotion of Catholic studies, fostering exchange of knowledge and ideas. And there are also a lot of seminars, publishing, and conferences just to share. In 2014, after the Matthew Ricci musical that organized by Father Yan, we have a Matthew Ricci intercultural dialogue, 4 talks, almost 100 people. At that time was not too influenced by COVID yet. And so a very good responses of these 4 talks. And Father Yan, one of the speakers, Professor Kwok, Father Peter Choi, etc. And in what Yuan Dao has been doing, including a lot of academic conference, I think one of the very important conference was March 2018, the 7th academic conference in Rome with Gregorian University Foundation on Christianity in the Chinese society, impact, interaction, and interculturation. The 6th academic conference in Beijing, topic is influence of Christianity in contemporary China. And then second one, transformation and adaptation, social world of Catholic Church in China. So, and there are books, some translation of books, some are also published in the Journal of Catholic Thought and Culture, Catholic Thought Study, etc., and the Chinese translation. Partial publishing of all these books and also Chinese translation by the fathers and priests and scholars. So without too much of your time, I would like to give it to Professor Kwok to share a little bit of this summary of new encyclical Fratelli Tutti.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you for the opportunity for me to present, share with you within this short period of time, the experience that we gone through last month on the 27th, the webinar on Fratelli Tutti and its implication to Hong Kong and its Catholic diocese. We're very grateful to have Dominic to be the respondent at the time, and Professor Michael Barnes also participated and spoke at the end. In fact, I visited Margaret Beaufort twice in the last 2 years and met Anna, discuss about this collaboration between Margaret Beaufort and Hong Kong, especially Yuan Dao Study Society. As Christine explained to you, Yuan Dao Study Society, in fact, has a very strategic position to bring the Church of China to connect the church with the rest of the world, especially with European seminaries and universities. And the contact with Margaret Beaufort would be the first in United Kingdom. And this webinar that we had on October 27th had a specific meaning for Hong Kong. Originally we planned to have another topic. In fact, it's Dominic's talk on music, but we changed it to let Hong Kong participants to have a chance to share the experiences that we had in Hong Kong in the last few years with the academics and theologians in UK in this particular incident. So we had 3 speakers. Dr. Peter Chang was the former chief editor of Hong Kong Po, the official newspaper for the Catholic Diocese in Chinese. And Professor Stephen Z, who's an analytical philosopher, and I myself as an intercultural historian. We spoke. The timing was very tight. Originally, we planned to have the whole webinar finished within 1.5 hours, but because of the extended discussion, we took it to 2 hours. And Dominic responded, and it was Father Peter Choi who convened it. In order to let you read the PowerPoint more fully, I would shift it to the whole screen. And the whole webinar was placed in the context of Hong Kong in the last 4 years. The experience, Hong Kong has been undergoing a very, very important phase of its decolonization process. In fact, I was invited to speak in Liverpool last year in the MBIT conference on the situation of Hong Kong in July 2019, which was last year. So the discussion that we had in this Fratelli Tutti encyclical had to be placed in this context. The political changes, the very serious, in a way, civic protest movement and direct clash between the government and different participants or different stakeholders in the society. So you can see from the umbrella, what they call the Occupy Central movement and umbrella movement in 2014, the direct confrontations, millions of people were participating into this movement. And towards the end, it turned into more and more violent social protests and became a multidimensional contradiction. And so what started middle of last year, what we call the anti-extradition law turned into a very intensive power struggle within different parts of Hong Kong. So it's a highly politicized situation. As you can see from the slides, the protesters in Hong Kong, in fact, they were advocating, some of them, these are very extreme groups. They're advocating for direct but intervention by the American government, especially President Trump, into the situation in Hong Kong, asking the president to liberate Hong Kong and for Hong Kong independence. So it touched on something very, very sensitive in the whole political structure and culture in the Chinese government. So you can see the turning point of mid-June of last year. Within the last six months of the year, situation turns more and more serious, more and more violent, and both from the protesters and also from the government. So you can see the protesters, in fact, they are well trained in a way, otherwise they won't be able to do something like that. They prepared, a lot of petrol bombs, and they use different kind of weapons, and they smash windows, and all these. These are well trained, protesters. They're the violence groups. But you can also see the response from the police. They're turning to more and more violent actions. So it become a very confused situation. But I think what's most damaging to the civic society of Hong Kong, because the protesters turned into very serious vandalism and destruction of the civil societies. Anyone they take private actions to attack anyone they felt opposing their views, both openly and privately. So this kind of situation became so serious. I think I'm citing for your reference. There are two major or most serious confrontation within two universities in Hong Kong. There was the November, the first one was in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, which I taught for 27 years, and the second and last one in Hong Kong Poly University. You can see the situation. Hong Kong turned into a battleground. And it's, they have all kind of, exchanges of attacks, and situation turned into such a serious, and there were students and protesters surrounded by the police for at least a week within this university. So in this webinar that we had in October, Professor Stephen Z uh, have a very detailed analysis, with, even though it's only within 15 minutes. He analyzed the whole situation, analyzing how different forces, international forces, especially the American forces, infiltrated into Hong Kong in the last 15 to 20 years, and how the distortion of the social media and the media, and how popularism and liberalism in Hong Kong's twisted. And then there was a whole trend of fundamentalism and religious and ideological attacks within the Hong Kong situation. And another speaker, Dr. Peter Zhang, who was in fact a counselor and psychologist, he tried to put forward the concept of dialogue advocated by the encyclical. So he talked about the base for dialogue. So I would like to go through what I personally presented at that time. I try to trace, put the whole thing in the context of Hong Kong in the process of decolonization, Hong Kong searching for a new identity, and the whole situation was so confused and mixed up with the new international political order and power struggle, internationally. And Hong Kong exactly in the last 4 years failed in dialogue, all kind of conflicts, as you can see. And for the diocese and for the Christians and the Catholics in Hong Kong, in fact, a lot of them forgot the basic values of the gospel about the lessons of Jesus dying on the cross. So I think it's a situation that the Fraternal Tutti mentioned about the whole strategy of ridicule, relentless criticism, all these in fact apply exactly to the situation in Hong Kong. And even in social media in Hong Kong, the Catholic media, they, all kind of slang, attacks, defamation, slander became a commonplace. So it's the whole situation in Hong Kong is so distorted. And that's why the Fraternal Tutti came as something very timely and very important for Hong Kong. So Fraternal Tutti brings in the concept of integral human development to vision of new kind of social political action based on values, mercy, and fraternal love, and universal love, and seeking of the fraternity based on love for the for a dialogue with within human dignity and with human individuals. So the message for Hong Kong in particular, the advocacy of a better kind of politics, trust truly on service of common good, and is very important and appealing to Hong Kong. The social political actions have to be based on love and charity. The concept of charity is so important, as the Pope brought out the teaching of the Samaritan, and the whole concept of politics based on love and overflowing of small gestures of mutual care and civic and political dialogue. So the encyclical also advocated effective love, social love, and political love. And the dialogue is as a strategy for social teaching, a dialogue for a new kind of culture, to bring different point of views together, and the significance of listening and grasping the significance others have to say. This kind of dialogue have to be based on consensus and respect of truth. The division and polarization, which have dominated in the last year for Hong Kong, had to be changed. And The Pope was in the encyclical was very clear about the message about nonviolence and the fact. And for my conclusion, in my final remarks, the Fraternal Tutti in Hong Kong Diocese, the historical role of the diocese as a bridging church to link up the Church of China to the Universal Church has been seriously undermined in the last few years. This is a historical task which Hong Kong has to take up to continue this legacy. The historical Hong Kong, for a special city in China, serving as its window and to the world, has been undergoing deep changes. And this is why the three papal exhortation and encyclicals of Pope Francis are so important to Hong Kong Diocese. And we need to look to closer and deeper into these fundamental roles and responsibilities to support the new evangelization efforts advocated by the Vatican Council II. Looking at the future development of the Church of China and Hong Kong should have an important role to play, and with the richness of fraternal duty to provide a global overview of the world from the perspective of the gospel, and the Hong Kong congregation need to humbly study and seek discernment from it. So I was asking, we pray for the.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Dominic to respond. Yes.
Thank you very much, Christine and Edmund. When Anna called me to ask if I would like to be involved at the Margaret Beaufort end of the Yuan Dao collaboration and to do coordination work, I was very honored. It was a completely new horizon for me, and actually one which has been, I think, a very timely opportunity and a learning curve. I mean, I work as a theologian in the context of the Dominican, that is, as a preacher. So what I'm trying to do is to respond to the questions that people raise, and which, as it says in Vatican II, often don't admit ready answers from the church, which are a bit suspicious of people who have too quick answers. I think some of the analysis which Edmund has just given actually shows the problem when answers are given too quickly. So I was very happy to do this work, and I found myself learning a great deal. For example, in the first conference I was involved in, when we looked at Vatican II, and I heard from an older generation, I heard from Father Yan, an Italian priest working in Hong Kong since the 1960s, the 1950s, I think, and also Peter Coughlin, who as a young priest was actually present at Vatican II. Now, I've been preparing somebody for baptism who is an ethnic Indian from Trinidad, who is a Hindu and has been very concerned with decolonization. In fact, has taught me a lot about it. And I realized that actually God was asking me to learn about decolonization. The Yuan Dao stressed that it wasn't just meant to be us helping them, it's meant to be a mutual process. I mean, what right do we have to think that we in the West have all the answers? Sometimes we have caused some of the problems, frankly. So I felt that I was learning a lot about Vatican II from previous generations. There can also be generational colonization going on. So it was great that this was intergenerational. And in fact, when our Hong Kong friends are being very honest about this very real conflict that they're experiencing, a conflict of real physical violence, that was helping me to understand the conflicts in Britain, say over our relationship with the rest of Europe, say between religion and secularization, and indeed how we respond to the pandemic. I've been learning a great deal. It's also helped me with the paper I'm going to be giving Friday week on music. Music has been an area of conflict in the church. I've experienced that both as a music minister. I was an organist and choir master at the Dominican Church in London, or I entered the order, that's how I met Dominicans, and now as a priest and liturgist. And I see opportunities in dialogue with Confucianism to reframe the discussion in cosmological terms. I've always been fascinated by our relationship with the cosmos, something that Father Michael, Professor Barnes, was talking about earlier. And I see a great opportunity as I share the riches, rather forgotten riches, of early Christian cosmology with the Yuan Dao group to see what response might come from within a Hong Kong and Chinese context and indeed from within Confucianism, something I know very little about, but I'm looking forward to learning more. So thank you very much. That's all from me. Area.
Well, thank you very much for those really stimulating presentations. We have about 4 minutes for comments and questions. Does anybody want to start us off? You've wowed us all into silence. So this, I mean, it seems to me this is a very multifaceted and kind of multi-pronged approach here to this kind of looking at intercultural kind of conversations. And I mean, the different presentations about this, the different foci of all the different conferences. Do you see kind of key threads that are going to come out, or are you hoping it's going to keep on opening up new avenues of an approach?
Yeah. I think, yeah, I think diversity is the key, but also the theme of reliving the traditions in contemporary world, whether through music, whether through the topic of discussing Pope Francis' Fratelli Tutti in terms of the implications of Hong Kong is a very, very contemporary issues. And then especially brotherhood, harmony, and all these that we are right now facing. I think just like just now Professor Kwok mentioned about the context of Hong Kong. So I think it raises, after that 1.5 hour, a large group of people stay behind to discuss how are we going to face all these conflicts, how we live out Pope Francis' teaching in such a difficult tear-off or conflict situation in Hong Kong. Can we, dialogue? How can we dialogue in terms of there maybe judgment, maybe a lot of how should I say, a lot of differences, but that differences may be perception or maybe influenced by a long history of certain groups of maybe more vocal in terms of promoting certain views, etc. So I think we would like, while we discuss these themes about reliving the traditions, we would like to put the teaching, whether Vatican II, Pope Francis teaching, into a real life in Hong Kong context, in art, in music, and in daily life of people. Professor Wang wants to say something.
I would like to use this opportunity to in fact reflect on the collaboration, even though we only started in the last maybe 8 or 9 months. Taking the situation in Hong Kong, and in fact, if we look at the situation in America, in fact, in a way was in fact is more serious than Hong Kong. It's a country completely split. And situation in Hong Kong is linked up with the situation in China. Now the Church of China is opening up strategically. That's why the provisional agreement between the Vatican and China, the Chinese government, has become very timely. If we look at the progress of Vatican Council II, the development of the Catholic Church, Universal Church, in a way trying to address the changes of the modern world. China has changed a lot. The international order has changed a lot. America has changed a lot, and also Hong Kong. So there are theologians and a lot of issues that will be coming out from China. So far it's difficult for the faithful, both laity and clergy, to bring the issues to the international community in both the academian and as well as the seminaries. So I think in a way Hong Kong is now continue to play the role, as I mentioned at the end of my presentation, the bridging church. That's the strategic position that Hong Kong has adopted in the last 20 years. How would Hong Kong perform this role? And I think the contact with Margaret Beaufort that Christine and I discussed with Anna in the last 2 years, hope to achieve this goal. Yeah. Michael, do you have anything to add? Because you were there at our discussion last month.
No, but I do have a question which arises whenever talk about the significance, importance of dialogue comes up. First of all, how do you get something like that going? How do you make sufficient of an impact to get a response and to get the sort of response that you want? I don't doubt for one moment that a dialogue which seeks to overcome violence and that sort of polarity which leads to violence, that's absolutely essential. But I'm always thinking to myself, this is one of my questions always, how do you develop that sort of culture within which people can naturally sit down and talk to each other before taking to violence? How do you get your voice heard? And is there a level of force, is that the right word, which is necessary to get your voice heard?
If I may, very quickly, because of the shortage of time. In fact, at the webinar last month, I didn't have a chance to make my presentation as clearly as possible, especially towards the end. I think that's the question that Mr. Dennis Zhang, in fact, he's a senior barrister in Hong Kong. He asked the question how the diocese will respond to the encyclical, especially the relationship between politics and religion. I think what's important in a way, or critical in a way, for the Hong Kong diocese to consider, because of the Christian, the Protestant church, denominations were and are all split. There is no religious order in Hong Kong that would take up the responsibility, the social responsibility, as the Catholic diocese, because we are still unified as a unit, as an institution, whereas the rest of Hong Kong social institutions, be they universities, be they religious orders, only the Catholic diocese can take up this role. And if the Catholic diocese can, really study and actualize the ideals of the encyclical, because I think the core message of the encyclical is in chapter 2 of the Gospels, the Samaritan, because all these political dialogue and what they call affective love, social love, and all these has to base on true love. I think that's the Catholic diocese of Hong Kong should do. They have been avoiding politics, but in fact they were deeply involved in politics, because the emeritus Cardinal Sen was deeply involved in politics last 15 years in Hong Kong. He was directly involved with the Republican parties in the United States. So all the politicization of the diocese have been so negative. But if the diocese can put itself above politics, but involved in politics, this is what it, in fact, is a Taoist strategy, a Taoist concept in a Chinese classical philosophy, the Taoist concept of involvement and yet distant, So this is something very fundamental, and it's Hong Kong Diocese and the Yuan Dao Study Association and the Study Society, and in fact the new society that we have all set up in the last few months, what called Integral Human Development Study Society. We would like to put forward the concept of Pope Francis about integral human development as the future direction for the diocese. This is something that we need to do very carefully, but we would like to approach it from a theological or political theological perspective approach, rather than a purely secular political approach.
So I think I have to just cut in here because we've run
Okay.
out of time. But
Yeah,
you
sorry.
well, you no. I apologise and thank you so much, Professor Kwok, and for Christine and for Dominic for presenting. But obviously you're free to carry on the conversation. But I know that some people may want to take a 45 or a little bit of a break before coming back this afternoon. So if you want to leave, please do feel free to leave, but if you want to carry on the conversation, please feel free to carry on the conversation. And can we just thank all of you for this very interesting.
So just one last point is that we're planting a little seed now, but we would like this collaboration. Definitely, we would like to bring a lot of people actually to Margaret Beaufort for summer program, exchanges, etc. But with all your support as well. Yeah, thank you.
Christine, I've got a dash for lunch, but do message me if you've got any comments or questions on what I said. So, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Michael, you have any response to what I just said?
I need to get back to you, Edmund, because I promised you something on Fratelli, and I will do that.
Yeah, we'll communicate later. Okay.
I'll do that.
Any comments or questions from other participants if you have time?
That's
okay.
Barnabas.
Barnabas.
Yeah.
If I may, I have this habit of thinking about things around the work that I'm interested in David Tracy, the Chicago-based Catholic theologian. And as you were talking about the polarization, both in Hong Kong and also, of course, in America, he has a line about the importance of what he calls a dialectical imagination, an imagination that is passionate for justice, that is suspicious of things that are going on, but also a line that somehow, unless that dialectical imagination can become also the root of an analogical imagination that seeks a vision of togetherness amongst difference, then it spirals into rage and despair. And I was thinking of that as I heard you talking about the challenge of re-establishing dialogue in Hong Kong in particular.
I think in the Fratelli, there's a very important point about truth, because this encyclical is basically a socio-political piece of theological writing. It's on the one hand, it's based on the God, the love of God, the gospel. At the same time, he has put into consideration some basic concept of that we have to confront and we have to face truth. So this is something that, in fact, the other speaker in the webinar last month, that analyzed very clearly the whole distortion of truth, in Hong Kong, media and social media. But at the same time, this kind of analytical discussion has to be put back in, as you mentioned, this dialectical process. This is something that I personally have been promoting in the last 30, 40 years. That this is in fact, in a way, the Chinese way of thinking. The Chinese way of thinking, basically is dialectical. From classical, 2,000 years ago, they started this whole concept. This is what environment, our concept of, if we discuss the Laudato Si or environmentalism, is basically a dialectical concept approach. And I think the Hong Kong situation used to be, have this kind of values of thinking. But in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, because of the change of very, I believe a lot of manipulation in social media, and in the last 15 years, that's what the analysis of the other speaker, Professor Stephen Z, did, last month. He provided a very clear analysis of how the Americans infiltrated into the Hong Kong situation in the last 15 years, and the Hong Kong diocese was also involved. Because this kind of Cold War mentality in Hong Kong used to calm down for quite a number of years, but in the last 10 to 15 years revived. So all these political issues that came together. But I think your point is very important. I will also certainly look into that, this kind of dialectical perception or approach.
Yeah,
you.
but sorry, just to come, Tracy's concern, I think, is that you could have a dialectical imagination and approach that runs away with itself, and in the end will define everything in terms of oppositions between acceptable and unacceptable. And we will no longer, and that will create a kind of vortex in which only people who think like me will be acceptable.
I think that's exactly what the Taoist or even the Confucian concept of dialectics, in fact, is a range. It's a range instead of two poles. You know, they don't accept polarization in Chinese classical culture. It's a dialectics as used, you know, understand about the diagram of I Ching. You know, it's the two fishes, you know, fish with yin yang. You know, so this, but I think somehow the kind of changes in Hong Kong political imagination has turned more and more rigid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barnabas. And Barnabas has written the response. We will definitely look into it. Thank you. Take a rest.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, we should take a little bit of dinner before coming in.
Yeah. Okay.
See you a bit. Yeah.
See you. Thank you very much.